What's going on, people of the interweb? Giving it just a minute to see if anybody can make it soon. Notification went out very, very late. So giving it just a minute. Got kind of a mixed bag of stuff to talk about tonight. Hence, it's a kind of a mashup. First thing that I wanted to talk about is the fact that people need to calm down. There's a lot of division, and it doesn't do anyone any good. Hello, Ashley B. Can you hear me very well? Hopefully so. Hopefully audio and video and everything's decent. I don't monitor this myself, so is what it is. Alright. Hey, I even managed to get the chat box to show up well. Alright, go me. So, like I said, people need to calm down, kind of roll back some of the division that we have going on. And a good reason for that has to do with the fact that there's a historical trend that happens where you get the tribalism going, you get one side versus the other side, and they start pushing back and forth, and it's like, oh, these people this, these people that, these people this. And it ends up where the two tribes start basically stating that there are fundamental differences between them. Now, when this happens, nothing good comes of it. The results of that ends up being where people can't find common ground anymore. There is common ground, but they can't find it. The reason they can't find it is because they're not able to see past this. It's a haze. It's almost like a brainwashing, if you will, that says you're not the same. Well, we are. We just have different views. And the historical trend is that when this division comes up, you get people who start viewing other groups of people as, well, basically different, and that eventually turns into viewing them as less than. It'll be, they're less than we are, they're less than ideal, they're less than human eventually. And that division takes a number of stages to get there. I mean, you've got the very first part of it has to do with dividing people out, classifying people different. And you've got different categories that people get put into, different labels that get put onto them. You can take what's going on in America right now, for example, and you've got people who got divided out into class. They got divided out by race, they got divided out by ethnicity. You've got the division of African American, Mexican American, Latino American, Asian American, whatever, as opposed to just saying, hey, you're here, you're part of the country, you're part of the people, you're American. So that division is going to come with its own challenges, namely the fact that you cannot expect people to stand together when you divide them into different categories. I mean, if you want to look at some of the stuff with race or an ethnicity as a just an identifier, as far as or it's not an identifier, a descriptor. That's one thing. But when you're trying to build an identity, to have a good, cohesive, functioning society, you need to have a common identity or commonality between the people. Every time you separate a group out, and a group out, and a group out, you lose that cohesion. You start losing the ability for people to see eye to eye and work together properly. Let's see. Ashley B says, I don't think people realize that's an American thing where they're dividing by categories such as Asian, African American. Yeah, it is pretty much an American thing. If you go to other countries, they don't have that division. You're either part of the population of the country, part of the citizenship, or whatever your sense of community is, or you're not. In America, we have a melting pot. The melting pot of America comes with people blending cultures from all over the place, although what they're doing isn't blending cultures. Let's see. Unspecified Podcast and Review says, I'm late dinner. Hey, have a full belly, man. I'm glad you guys can join. Notice went out very late, last minute. I actually set a notification or set my other channel to where it'll notify me when the notification goes out, and I had to look for it. It populated like 5 lines down on the list. But anyways, back to what I was saying. As far as the cohesion, when you are looking at America, the way that it melts together, you've got cultures from different countries, and you can be proud of the fact that your heritage is from somewhere, but just the fact that your family came from somewhere. My family at some point came from various parts of Europe. I don't need that to be part of my culture. I don't need that to be part of my identity. I'm American. And at the end of the day, that's what's important. It might be kind of a cool talking point, like, hey, my family at some point did this. Outside of that, it's not really relevant to who I am. And we've made it this focus on our personal identities and trying to tie that to all of these external factors like race and ethnic backgrounds, and it's just ends up being this point where it's like, oh well, I'm this, oh well, I'm that, well, I'm this, and it sows division amongst the people. If you look at all of the different areas where you've got somewhere like New York City or Los Angeles, where you have these different ethnic backgrounds and the people coming from them, and rather than take and blend together, they separate themselves out into these little sub communities, and it's it's that group. Well, then if you've got an entire community full of one group of people, anybody that goes in there is going to stand out and risk being ostracized. But the big point that I was trying to make with this is that when you go from separating people out into these different categories, you are weakening the structure of the community and the country or the population and their ability to interlock and maintain the fabric of society for that area. Now, one of the things that's happened historically from that, you've got, like I mentioned earlier in it, Unspecified, I know you got here a little bit late, but I was talking about the division of people and how they start othering each other and making them seem less than, and it's like they're less than us, they're fundamentally different, they're eventually that leads to being viewed as less than human or subhuman. And historically, when that's happened, that has led to things like genocides. You can look at the events of Germany in the 1920s and 30s. And that was a great example. It was a group of people that, I hate to use the term great example there because it's a really horrible thing that happened, but it's a prime example of how it happens, where one group of people decides that another group of people are less valuable, less important, less human or whatever than they are, and then they start to treat them differently based off of their views. Another point in time where that happened was during the westward expansion of the U.S., where the natives were occasionally viewed as less than. They're less civilized. They're fundamentally different. They don't have the same values, the same beliefs, the same traditions, any of that. And so they weren't valued or protected the same. They weren't given the same kind of a voice. Well, like I said, that historically leads to things like genocides or ostracizing sections of the community or the population, whether it's an individual or entire groups of people. And from the historical examples, if you look at what happened and you look at what's going on today with the U.S. and the polarization, the political divide that's being pushed on everyone, people need to remember that we are all in this together. This isn't a us versus them. It's not a my tribe versus the other tribe. You look at the rhetoric that comes out of the Republican Party, you look at the rhetoric that comes out of the Democrat Party, and it's so much of a us versus them and driving division. And there's no good that's going to come out of it. So, really, it's a very important thing for Americans as a people to come together and remind each other that, hey, we might think a little bit different, but we are still the same. We're still in this together. We're in the same boat. Like Tom MacDonald said in one of his songs, he's got a line that says, "We're all in the same boat. Why are you trying to make holes? If they sink, we sink. It's madness." And it's really a good point that he made. And, again, people need to look at it and say, hey, we're all together in this. Hey, thanks for the subscription, Unspecified. Welcome in. And all right, no worries. Wrong account. So at the end of the day, everyone needs to start pulling together on this, or we're going to be divided, and the result of the division is not going to be good. I know there's a common view with conservatives that, hey, we're more likely to be armed and potentially heavily armed, and you know what? That might be the case. But I would like to remind everyone that whereas the conservatives tend to be armed, the liberals have a lot of the institution right now. And if you think about it, when it comes to the institutions, there's a ideology that's been pushed through the colleges. That's been pretty well established. You've got a lot of people that are conservative, that are blue-collar workers. They're the laborers. You get a lot of people who are liberal that are in that group. Oftentimes, they're not talking politics. They're not talking about the stuff that divides them. I'm going to adjust my light for just a second. I don't know about you guys, but I keep catching a reflection of it off my glasses, and it is driving me nuts. So when it comes to the trades and even a lot of the military members, your low-level infantrymen, your grunts, your enlisted service members tend to be conservative, but the people above them, the officers, the ones who are giving direction and orders, in order to go into the military as an officer, you have to have a degree, which means that the officers in the military are going through this education process, or brainwashing as some people call it, whatever, indoctrination, whatever you want to consider it. They're learning the ideology. You've got people who are in charge of businesses where they, management of businesses where they want people to have degrees. Same thing. You've got people who are in charge of various aspects of civilization that are going through the school systems. It's not going to be a cut and dry, like, oh yeah, we're armed, they're not. We might be armed, they might be in positions of authority. Law enforcement, they want you to have a degree. So if the division and everything continues down the wrong path, it can lead to a very, very unpleasant outcome that nobody really wants. And I will say this with absolute confidence right now, that the end result of a conflict, if it is continued to be pushed to that point, is not going to be pretty. It's not going to be anything pleasant for anyone. So it's very important that we encourage everyone we know, cool your jets. Cool your jets, tone down the division, tone down the rhetoric. Yeah, we've got a difference in opinion or views on our politics. Settle it through legislation. We do not want to let stuff get to the point where, bullets are flying. It's just not a good place we want to be, and there are external forces at work there. I'll be straight up with you on that. There are. That's not something that we're going to have a lot of control over. It's something that needs to be kept in mind. And at the end of the day, the more people that work towards peace, the more they will be able to overcome. Rather than focusing on differences of ideas or differences of ideology and all of that, focus on the similarities. As Ashley B said here, we're split on so many points and we forget that we're all God's children. Not everyone's going to believe in God, but that doesn't change the fact that they still are. And end of the day, we all bleed red. If you take the skin off of every one of us, we all look the same. Some variation based off of physique, but we're the same. It doesn't matter if you're blue, if you're yellow, if you're brown, if you're black, if you're green, purple, white, I don't care what. You're all the same. It's going to be a thing that's going to require outreach. It's going to require community building. You're going to have to talk to people, have conversations, get past these talking points that, there's all the difference. Anyways, that's the end of my rant on that one, but that's something that's been bugging me for a hot minute now that I wanted to discuss. I know there's not a whole lot of people in here right now. Hopefully, it'll get shared out and some other people catch that and go, hey, you know what? That's a good point. And, it actually reminds me of this thing. I had a realization earlier. There's a conversation going on about reality and whether it's objective or subjective. And The idea that reality is subjective is a logical fallacy. Hey, MLP. Good to see you in here. Now, saying that the idea that reality is subjective is a logical fallacy is because reality is fact. It is solid, it is objective, it's observable. Your perception of reality is subjective, but reality itself is not. And the argument that reality is subjective is actually a direct contradiction to itself, because you're saying that this person's belief, how they view reality is true, but how this person views reality is true, even if this is in direct opposition of this. So, with that, that actually kind of ties into the conversation about, people being different. We have different views, we have different experiences, we look at life through the different experiences, and we come to our own conclusion about what it is. But at the end of the day, it's still the same reality, just a different viewpoint of it. So, again, differences aren't that big. Let's see, catch up on chat here for a minute. Unspecified Podcast and Review says, fight the division itself. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and rulers of wickedness in high places. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, let's see. Said, that's right, we're actually going to get on and talk about the same thing. It's thick right now with the wedging. Yeah, there's non-stop push for division. You look at the leadership of the country. Trump, when he was president, he was divisive with things that he said. It wasn't the same type of division as what we're seeing currently with Biden. It wasn't necessarily labeling the opposing party or opposing tribe, but it was still divisive. If anything, you could think of it as kind of an escalation from one to the other. And again, we need to remind everyone, tone it down before stuff gets out of hand. I mean, there's already plenty of cases where it has gotten out of hand, and we don't need more of them. Let's see. Mrs. Unspecified says, I think with the recession, we're going to see the value of degrees go way down, and it would be nice to hire someone who has a specialized degree, but we can't afford it, so we hired straight out of high school and trained him on the job. And that's awesome. Personally, I didn't go the college route for degrees. I went to college. I went to 3 different colleges, in fact. I didn't go for a degree. I went for experience and education in specific fields that I was interested in. For sake of discussion, I went to school and took auto body and paint, color matching and pinstriping at one school. I had a car that had body damage that I wanted to repair, and I wanted to learn how to do it, so I went, took classes, worked on my car, got college credits while I was doing that. There was another one I went to, interested in all things mechanical, so planes, boats, cars, motorcycles, bicycles. If you wanted to throw a Briggs and Stratton motor on a Radio Flyer wagon and go to town, I'm in. Sounds fun. Now, with that, I've had boats. I wanted to learn to work on boats, so I went to a different college and I took marine mechanics. Now, There was that one. I've gone to other education programs for different specialized things. I learned how to run AutoCAD. I learned how to run SolidWorks. I've learned how to do manual and CNC machining, welding, um, the programming, and then pick up other stuff as I go. Now I'm not doing that to try to get a degree, because I never thought that a degree was very useful. It's like, okay, so I go to school for, say, 4 years to get a bachelor's degree, but I didn't spend all 4 of those years learning about the specific thing that I'm getting a degree in. It's half of that time was spent learning general education stuff, which is, in my experience, was a recap of high school. And then the other part of the time, you're learning about stuff more tailored to your degree. You could take the same amount of information, maybe condense classes, and say you're taking unit 102 and 101, and you blend them together. Now you've got twice the information that you're covering, but half the time. So if you were really going to be focusing on your college education for something specific to a skill set, it would make more sense to just focus on your skill set, more like what a trade school would do. And you'd save a lot of money in the process. Now, trades will be around. There will always be a demand for them because there's always a need. Electricians, fabricators, welders, sheet metal people, HVAC, ducting, automotive, ships. All of that, there's going to be a demand for it. Apparently, I have a spy in the midst. I don't know if you saw that in the corner there. Nope. Excuse me on that. Life with children, it's fun. They present their own challenges. So, anyways, yeah. Degrees are only going to be valuable for so much. At the end of the day, I've been in plenty of places where they've hired people with degrees and they've hired people with experience, and the person with experience is going to do a lot better. People with degrees come out of school thinking that they know everything, and they have the book smarts, but they don't have the street smarts or practical knowledge about it. They've got the theory. Well, in a production environment, in a manufacturing environment, you might have a little bit of benefit from looking at it at a different angle, but it's not going to do anywhere near as good. You could have someone who goes, okay, I know how this is supposed to work in theory, versus your person who goes, I know how to put this theory to work. So, personally, I think experience should be worth a lot more than a degree. A degree just says that, you went through the program. So, if the situation gets bad, having book smarts isn't going to be anywhere near as valuable. Let's take something to do with agriculture. You've got your book smarts, which says, hey, as a general rule, this is how this works, versus your personal first-hand experience from someone who's, say, a third-generation farmer who knows the specifics for the exact area that they're in. You've got regional differences on stuff. You've got seasonal differences on stuff. You've got seasonal weather patterns that are different in one area versus another one. You've got seasonal conditions on the soil. You've got what the soil has been shown to support over the generations. That information doesn't just get learned from a college. That's hands-on, on the ground, like boots on ground knowledge and information. Is there a place for degrees in the book smarts? Yes, absolutely. realistically, the two should work together, and if applied correctly, could work together quite beneficially. Let's see. Back to the chat. MLP says, yes, we color reality through our experiences. Exactly. But reality is still what it is. It's a shared thing. Let's see. MLP also says, what we really have is a class divide that's being pushed as a color divide. Yes. It is a division of class, and what you run into, if you look at it historically, the situation will get bad. The lower classes will rise up against the upper classes. So as a means of distracting the lower classes, they turn them against each other rather than against them. Again, to quote a Tom McDonald song, it talks about, they know that if we unite, we'll go against them, so they divide us with votes in elections. Again, it just pit each other against each other. And the two-party system that we have here is a great example of how that happens. You're kind of fleecing people, if you will, between a couple of views. There's no reason that you can't care about some of the humanitarian things and still value your right to defend yourself, your property, and your country. It's ridiculous to think that those can't go hand in hand. Now, let's see. MLP is saying we need having at least one parent stay at home with kids be okay again. Right now, two must work in order to make ends meet. Yes, that is a very, very good point, and something that my wife and I have discussed many times ad nauseum. And it's, if you look at where there was a notable decline for American families, it was, not to put this on women, but with the push for women in the workforce. Nothing against women in work, but the value of motherhood far, far exceeds any value from being in a career. It's, it's more rewarding. It's infinitely more important, really, on the sense of you're directly shaping the future generations. And as if you look at the trends of history since, say, the 60s, or a little bit before that, really, you've had a couple of things come out of it. You've got, both parents are working, which means that they've got more money, which means that the cost of goods is going to go up, just because more people can afford more expensive things. You also have kids that are getting less time with their parents because the parents are spending their time working. And as time's gone on and things have become more expensive, people are seeking higher and higher wages, which the higher earning positions require more time dedicated to the position and to the company. And there's something that Jordan Peterson said in one of his speeches. He said, you can have time or you can have money. You cannot have both. And at the end of the day, you've got to have a balance of stuff. You need to be able to have money to take care of what you need to, but you need to have time for your family. You need to have time to keep everything together. There's a saying that goes around, and it's oftentimes in memes. It's like, I've got this high-paying job so that I can afford this fancy car, this fancy house or expensive house, and all of these toys. But I'm spending all of my time sitting in traffic or at my job and not able to enjoy these things that I'm going to that job to pay for. Let's see. Ms. Unspecified says, so think about single parents and how much quality values they have they have actual time to teach their children. So, a little bit of backstory about me. I was raised by a single mom. Not my dad wasn't like completely out of the picture, but my time with my dad was extremely limited, like 4 days a month. And there's a huge disadvantage that comes with that. Yes, it helped shape who I am today. To be honest, if I could go back in time and change it, I wouldn't. I've got an amazing wife. I've got two beautiful children that are, the most important things to me. And if anything from my past was changed, I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't necessarily have the family that I have, and I am absolutely not willing to forego that for anything different. That said, I did also learn that there are disadvantages that come from it. My mom, when I was growing up, she worked exhausting hours. We actually had a second thing that we did to keep extra money coming in to help with offsetting some of the costs, where we would do mailer stuffing. So like a corporation that was sending out newsletters or some sort of ads that were going out to people, where you've got the mail envelope comes in, you open it, it's got the generic paperwork. We used to stuff and seal those envelopes and mail them out. And that was something, as a family bonding experience, as cheesy as that sounds, I participated with my mom in doing that. So, there's a lot of things that my mom wasn't able to teach me. As a mom to a son, there's just experiences and an understanding of being a man that she can't understand. She can't pass that along. Just the same as there's aspects of being a woman that I could not pass on to my daughter. And that is going to be a disadvantage for single parents. I know plenty of other single parents that they're trying to give the best life they can to their child, but they're looking at it from a material standpoint. And yes, the child might not go without because the parent, a mom is, working and she's providing. They're getting what they need. They're getting most of the things they want, but there's a lot of life lessons that they aren't being taught. And there's a lot of the time, the interaction, and the bonding that kind of solidifies the value of others and family that don't get passed down that way. And it's really sad to see, especially looking around and seeing how prevalent it is. Whether it's a single mom or a single dad, just the balance of home and work life isn't there all too often, or people are running themselves ragged trying to keep up with it all. And yeah, it's absurd to think about it. My house, my wife is a stay-at-home mom, homemaker, and I couldn't begin to tell you how much I appreciate the fact that she does that. Not just because she's watching the stream, but because it is a tremendous add to our family. It's in a lot of ways, it's almost more valuable than my going to work and to provide. Just not necessarily on a sustenance side. So yeah, it's a huge thing having time to be with their kids. And if you look at the statistics, a lot of the people who get into drugs, or they get into gang activity, or just getting caught in with the wrong crowd, they're coming in from single families. Or as a contrast to that, you get some of the like trust fund kids where they've got the you know super wealthy parents, but they have to work and work and work and work their butts off, so they have zero time at home. So that again, they're not able to spend time with their family, and the kids that grow up out of that get into problems. There's I love to reference sayings because all too often there's a good foundation in them. And another one of those is that idle hands are the devil's plaything, and it rings absolutely true. I know when I've gotten in trouble, it was because I had nothing going on, and I sought entertainment in some of the stupidest ways possible. Maybe not like the show Jackass level, but stupid pastimes and poor choices where it's no small wonder that I am still alive today. Let's see. MLP said, excellent point, Tiff, and absolutely so. Unspecified podcast says, how was Jackass level? I was almost there. I still had a little bit of the discipline from potentially heavy-handed discipline that I received when I did get caught doing something stupid, as a nice reminder, like, hey, there is still consequence to your actions. So a little bit of restraint from that. Self-restraint. Emo stage. Let's see, Ms. Unspecified said, I was raised by a single dad, landing the same with the mom. Not a lot of time. Great parents, just no time. So now we're left learning the things in our mid-20s and should have taught. Yeah. That's exactly it. There's so many life lessons that get taught when we're young that require the family being there. And some of the other cultures, you can look at some of the Asian cultures for an example. I'm not going to try to point out which ones, because I'm pretty sure it's kind of a blanket across many of them, but you have households where you've got multiple generations of a family living in the same household, and they all work together. They all share in the responsibilities of homemaking, in cleaning, cooking, teaching the kids, watching the kids, everything, taking care of each other. And I think that those families honestly have a leg up on us as far as value for each other and lessons learned and just their internal support networks. Okay, you know what? I keep getting the reflection off these, so you're gonna have to deal with me without them, and I might have to squint a few times. Let's see. Ashley B says, same thing with her, learning things I should have already known. Yeah, a great example of things that we have to learn on our own is how to handle situations appropriately, measured responses to things. And that's something I know myself. I had a great example from my dad with things that I was interested in. A lot of it developed or helped kind of push my interests. My dad's a gearhead, always has been. He's been into outdoors. That's why I enjoy camping, why I enjoy cars, working on them, driving them, off-roading. Grew up with dune buggies, going out to the sand dunes. But my interactions with my dad at the same time were very limited. So It was uh, 2 weekends a month, and it was trying to cram a whole bunch of have fun and interact with each other, and um, kind of being involved that way, as opposed to teaching the life lessons and work ethic. I didn't start working with very good work ethic. I'm not going to lie about that. It's kind of embarrassing, but I had to figure it out. And that took time, it took trial and error. And I'm not going to knock my parents. They did the best they could given the circumstances, or at least the best they figured they could. But it is definitely kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? A disadvantage, if you will. Let's see. I'm gonna see if I can open the chat separately. Oh, that's definitely different. I have a second. No. No, I'm doing that. Let's see. Miss Unspecified says. Oh, Unspecified said that I believe it should be closer to that. I'm thinking you're talking about the multi-generational households with that, and if that's the case, I wholly agree. There's life lessons from prior generations that we won't have to be able to teach someone. Take for example my grandparents. My one grandpa was in the military at the end of World War II. He was over in Europe, basically in the group of people. Best I can find out, he was in the group of people after the initial wave and like pushing towards the end of the war, where they were going in afterwards and like liberating people out of the camps over there. And there's got to have been a number of life lessons that he could have taught me based off of what he saw and what he experienced. That being separate, he lived in a different state from me, so I didn't get to see him very often. But I couldn't imagine, how much he could have taught me. Like, hey, look, make sure that you don't do this because this is the kind of outcome that has come from it. Kind of like what I was talking about with othering people at the start of the stream. And my other grandpa came from Arkansas, during the Depression. And there's a lot of things that he did when I was growing up that didn't make sense. As far as, Christmas time, his gifts that he would give, like for myself and my sibling, was always, we'd get one of the big packs of cup of noodles. We would get packets, the cases of Top Ramen. We would get food and stuff of the sort. Now, as a kid, it was like, oh yeah, I'm getting this, but why am I getting this and not a bunch of toys or something like that? Now, getting older and looking at what's going on right now and what's potentially coming, I can reflect on it and go, oh, he lived through a period where they did not have. So, coming from that experience, giving a gift of food is, huge. It's a great sign or symbol of how much care and concern they had for you. It's that, like, I went through this, I don't want you to have to have this stuff. And my grandpa, to that end, was a bit of a hoarder by today's standards. And it was one of those things, like, grow up, you go around, you're like, man, there's just stuff everywhere. And let's be honest, as a kid, you're adventurous. You're like, hey, let's see what we can find. And so it'd become kind of like a fun treasure hunt every time you'd go there. But as I grew up a little while and got into my teens, it's like, wow, it's just it's always a mess there. There's always just stuff everywhere, and like he would have a refrigerator, and then he would have a backup refrigerator, and then he had another one that he was working on because at some point he was doing repairs. And I didn't understand that for a long time, and then when I started learning more about the Depression and how everything went with that, it started making sense. Aircraft. My family's in aerospace. I'm like third generation working with aerospace, so I will end up referencing that a lot. Aircraft have redundancy systems. If you look at your standard fighter or like a C-130 or other military transport, for every flight control system on it, there's a backup redundancy system. In some cases, like the A-10 Warthog, there's like redundancy systems. And it's all because you want a fallback if something fails. We've been in this state of relative comfort because we haven't been in a position where we've had to go without. Individual experiences vary there, but for the most part, prior to 2020, it's not like you'd go to the store and there would be empty shelves. So, I'm going to touch onto the chat real quick before I continue on this. Let's see. MLP says multi-generational households are the norm in both my culture and hubby's culture. That's how you build wealth and experience safely. Yeah, absolutely. Unspecified Podcast and Review says 100%. I don't think we should be so separated from family, especially our elders. Exactly. MLP is agreeing on that one. Ms. Unspecified says amen. That's what's worse is for a while the American dream kind of looked down on multi-generational households like it was some kind of failure to not be alone. Shame we shot ourselves in the foot there. Yes. That is kind of another point with it as far as the generations. Each generation has been more individually driven, and that's part of why we have what I would consider to be a generation of young narcissists right now, where they're just focused on them, what they want, what they can get, and how easily they can get it. And it's something that's been kind of a result of a individually focused society, and a lot of it I think comes from the fact that we've had an abundance of stuff, of goods and space and housing and whatever else, where in some of the other countries where they are more densely packed, there's not necessarily the option of, hey, I'm just going to go to this house instead. It's a, hey, we're all going to pull together here, because there's not a lot of other option for places, and we're going to be here to support each other. And they might not also might not have the same support network or structure to take care of the other generations of the family. So it does fall on the younger generations to take care of the older generations, and for that reason it behooves the older generations to provide as much knowledge in the younger generations as possible and show as much care and compassion to each other, because they want to reciprocate that. It's that you get what you reap, what you sow. Let's see. Going back on this, if you haven't noticed, I tend to go off on tangents and rants, and yeah, it happens. Let's see. Kelly S., hello. Welcome to the stream. Glad you can make it. Yeah, the Unspecified streams they're frequent. They're not on a schedule. Neither are mine. So I get that one. I run into the thing where I'll fall asleep and then for some reason wake up and it's like, oh, hey, they're live. Let's watch. Yeah, let's see. Kelly S. is saying, multi-generational households are awesome. Assuming that's what everyone wants. My granddad in-law has one of his grandkids living with him, gives kid a cheap place to stay, and keeps granddad out of a retirement home. Yeah, it's mutually beneficial. I mean, granted, there are some people who are just miserable to live with, and sometimes people are better off without that. But for the most part, there's a lot to be. It can be a great symbiotic relationship between the different generations in one household. I know my house, my mom, I love her. She can be a bit much. And not everyone in my family can get along together for very long, but is what it is. We do the best we can with it. Schedule, never heard of it. Yeah, no, exactly. Especially, you know what? If you're doing a live stream and you're a family, you've got kids, it gets hard, especially if they're young. My kids one's sub 8, the other's sub 3, so that's fun. You got to be able to roll with what you've got. Kelly S is not a night owl, and that's alright, not all of us can be. See, Miss Unspecified saying, but some folks value money over family, some people literally watch their kids be put on the street rather than give a free ride. Yeah, and a lot of them are going to be the people that I'm considering more narcissistic. They're self-centric. It's the me. What do I want? What can I get? MLP is saying, agreeing with Tiff. They're the same people who are going to be put in a nursing home and be upset about it. And yep. Again, you reap what you sow. Unspecified podcast. Yeah, I'm not saying I would move in with my parents tomorrow, probably due to the generational propaganda programming campaigns. Yeah, there's been a constant push, especially with the technological evolution in our country, where the younger generations think they're more intelligent than the prior generations or have more valuable knowledge because they understand the technology that the older generation does not. How many kids today that can work an iPad like nobody's business can go out and start a fire without matches or a lighter? But how much of the older generations that can't use an iPad to save their lives can go out and survive off of nothing? Personally, I think the hot ticket is not so much multi-generational households, but multi-generational homesteads. Something dropped? That's news to me. Who knows? Maybe they're going to be looking at, or the algorithm's going to start pushing against people who are supporting multi-generations. Oh, you're lagging. Okay. Yeah, you know what? I have a VPN that kind of connects and disconnects, and that might cause some problems. Or, who knows? The YouTube algorithms might just have, for a lack of better term, itchy trigger fingers when people who've discussed some of the things that I have talk. Wouldn't put it past them. Not going to sit here and say that everyone's out for, or they're out for me, but stranger things have happened. So, one of the other things that I was starting to touch on was the redundancy stuff. And we do have some interesting times coming up. You know, I would say it's a good idea to learn as much as you can about the Depression and what they did to get through some of it. Some people who are younger don't know as much about the Depression and the tie-in with the Dust Bowl around that same time, and where the foods that were happening was like soup kitchens and bread lines, and the soups would be, some cabbage, a couple of carrots, maybe some celery, and this would be cut up into a broth, and that was what you had, that and bread. So it's becoming more and more announced in the mainstream that there's some challenges coming up with food and the supply chain for it. Some of it is misguided as far as the blame, but the reality is there's going to be some tough times coming up. If you look at some of the policies that have been pushed in other countries, the Dutch, they had some of their environmental regulations come in, their ESG stuff, where they're telling the Dutch farmers that they need to reduce the nitrogen content from their nitrogen fertilizer use by between 10 and 90%. That is 90%, depending on the region that they're in. And the Netherlands is a very agricultural based country. They have a lot of agricultural exports. Now, this is something that's been mentioned for a while. Let's see, since probably January they started talking about that. They like to blame the current war in Ukraine that's going on, saying, oh, well, there's no fertilizer because of that. Well, Ukraine did reduce their fertilizer exports, so did Russia. Both of them were major fertilizer exporters for the world. But the same time that was going on, you also have other countries who are being told they need to reduce the, again, Netherlands, being told that they need to reduce the national herd by up to like 40%. That's a huge, huge reduction of what they can export. You've got countries like India who are putting a halt on exporting rice. You've got Russia, where they produce a lot of the world's wheat, and that was put on hold. And they want to blame the war, but not all of it has to do with the war. Some of it says, hey, you're going to sanction a country, but you're going to expect that country that you're penalizing to sit there and say, oh yeah, here, let me share my resources with you. That's lunacy. All right. Sorry, we're going to have to deal with the glare because I'm having a hard time reading the chat here. Let's see. Unspecified is talking about farms that grandma and grandpa had their own separate small 2-bed. There was the main house, separate small bed. Yeah, exactly. Talking about bringing back a nuclear family. Yep, probably get like 5 strikes for that one. MLP said the Dust Bowl just compounded the pain. Yes, it did. Major drought has an impact on crop yields, and that's going to have a trickle-down effect. See, Ms. Unspecified's asking who else thinks we'll see Dust Bowls again. You know what? Honestly, it's a pretty fair shot that we will. That's going to tie into actually another section to this that I'm going to be touching on after this. Kelly's not going to be eating Jello salad with peas, carrots, and pineapple. But that's like breakfast of champions right there. Yeah, farms during the Depression did do just fine. It's a lot of the, aside from the ones that were affected directly by the Dust Bowl, when you started getting into, getting goods to the people, that's where you run into problems, and that has to do with the economics of the situation. Um, Talking again about this current situation, you've got the UN talking about food shortages. Biden was talking about food shortages, saying that they're going to be real and they're going to be felt across everyone. It's not going to be just, Russia who's going to be impacted by it. And he even acknowledged that it was a result of the sanctions, not the war itself, the sanctions. So the response to the war. Now you've got other countries that have also stated they were going to limit or halt the export of crops. The situation in Sri Lanka, which they just dealt with a collapse due to their ESG policies, that they were told, hey, this is a great idea, don't do it, it's a trap. They're not going to be exporting a lot of crops, which there's plenty of stuff that they exported. I couldn't tell you what off the top of my head. I've got a pretty darn good memory, but not for everything. And the more that the stuff's going to be pushed, the more of an impact there's going to be. Now, when it comes to the crops, yes, they reduced the fertilizer exports earlier this year. That's not going to be felt on this year's harvest. That's going to be felt, or on this year's food supply, that's going to be felt next year. And I'm not wanting to be all doom and gloom on this. There's actually just a point of like, hey, look at this stuff, get stuff ready. Don't just rely on like freeze-dried stuff, but work on planting your own crops. Unspecified. I know you're looking at doing a hydroponic or aquaponic system. That is fantastic. I've done some hydroponic growing, small scale, and I did an experiment where I planted stuff in a raised bed planter outside at the same time that I was doing that, and the raised bed planter couldn't keep up. If you do the system right, you can sustain a family in a 12 square foot space as far as some produce. Now, aquaponics is very similar to hydroponics, but rather than adding nitrogen or the nitrates and nitrites to the system through chemicals and adjusting the pH balance that way, you have fish. The fish waste acts as fertilizer for the plants, and the plants clean the fish waste out of the water, which brings the nitrate and nitrite balance down, adjusts your pH balance depending. Apologies if you hear screams. One of the little ones just woke up and he's probably not the most thrilled, so I'm going to be cutting this kind of short here in a minute, but got a couple more points to touch on here. Back to the aquaponics. Your grow media, the grow media I was talking about yesterday, as opposed to lava rock, is called hydroton. It is a expanded clay pellet, and that's not going to affect your pH balance, whereas lava rock, because of the different mineral composition of the lava rock, can significantly throw off the pH balance and cause die-offs of your fish. If you're doing aquaponics, you can raise fish that you're going to just look at, and you can take and raise fish that you're going to eat. Examples, you can raise tilapia. Tilapia is good because you can have a relatively dense school of fish in the same area. They can tolerate worse or harsher water quality. They're also a warmer water fish, but they can be a little bit more tolerant. Depending on what you're trying to grow crop wise, you match that with the type of fish, because you've got something, for example, like a trout. Trout are a cold water fish, and there's crops that are more tolerant to cold water than to warmer water. So you can work that in. Catfish work good for it. You can also do something decorative like, koi. Um, there's a lot that you can do. There's a couple different types of aquaponic systems. There's what's called a floating raft system, where you've got kind of a pool of water, and you've got a foam raft with little net cups that come down that you plant your crops in. You've got a NFT system, which stands for nutrient film transfer. That one you can picture like a piece of PVC pipe coming down at a slight angle, and the net cups go down inside of that, and the roots just go down, and the nutrients in the water go by, and it the plants leach that into the roots. And little one's definitely up. He might come by for a minute. But if you do the nutrient film transfer, NFT, that's just a trickle of water goes by and it pulls the nutrients. If you're doing the nutrient film transfer, you can also tie that in with a floating raft system. You have what's known as an ebb and flow system, where it takes and it floods the grow bed, and then it'll hit a certain point and it drains out. Those use like a bell siphon to pull the water back out of it. So water goes up to a certain point, creates a vacuum going through the bell siphon that pulls the water out, and then it slowly fills back up. Different types of plants tolerate the different styles of those better than others. For example, something like a watercress will do good with a floating raft system. Same thing with lettuces. You can do a grow tower, where you're kind of doing a variation of the NFT system with grow medium like a hydroton, and you can do that with strawberries. So you do a vertical piece of PVC pipe, and you have tiers cut into it where it kind of tapers in. You have one taper in this way, one taper in this way, going down, and the nutrients or the water drops in from the top, and it'll flood into one, go down to the next one, go down to the next one. And if you're really creative about it, and you set up the system right, you can actually have one type of system feed into the next type of a system. So you could have your vertical tower feed down into a nutrient film transfer system that trickles down into a ebb and flow system that's going to dump down, or you can have that trickle down into a floating raft system that trickles into the ebb and flow system. You can do the floating raft system directly in your stock pond or tank. That's a really common thing. One thing you have to be careful of is how much water or sunlight gets into the water in your stock tank, because that could cause algae, and that'll suck some of the oxygen out, and that can cause issues for your fish. So if you're doing anything with like a floating raft system, a good idea is to throw an air pump with an air stone down into leave the pump out, but the air stone with the line goes down into the stock tank, and that keeps oxygen going for the fish. Also, your water system, or your drainage from your nutrient film transfer or your ebb and flow system, have that be higher up so that it creates a waterfall effect, because the water dropping into it will also help aerate it, and that'll help keep your fish alive. Now, needless to say, I've done copious amounts of research into this, and I'm just kind of waiting, as my wife would attest, for a situation where I have room to set one up. Let's see, touch on the chat for a second. MLP said, I saw someone turn their pool into an aquaponic growing area. Freaking amazing. Yes, absolutely. Ms. Unspecified said they're working on that slowly but surely. Unspecified, you're looking at doing tilapia. That's awesome. They're, like I said, they're really tolerant. They accept a lot of parameters. They breed prolifically, so you'll end up with a lot of them. Miss Unspecified said, "Big koi sell for big money too." Yes, they do. They, however, take a long time to grow. Let's see. Unspecified Podcast said all feeding into each other would be the ideal goal. Yeah, I have a design. I'll have to look on my external hard drive and see if I still have the drawing of it, but I have a design that I came up with for a system that would do that in a 4-foot by 8-foot area, just as a test case. That if I still have that design, I'll post it on your Discord or something, or I'll just send it to you over Instagram. Let's see. MLP says, "Man, I wish we all lived closer to one another. We do some amazing stuff." Yeah, my wife and I have talked about it a lot, that it would be really cool to have kind of like a commune, if you will. Not exactly like the hippie thing, but have a community farm where you've got a group of people who are like-minded, have a similar goal, have different experiences, different skills that they bring to the table, and everyone could work together on a large property. Say something, like 100 acres or something. Have everyone have a house. If you're wondering, wife's off to the side here and talking to me now. So, yay! I can actually bounce ideas off real time. But it would be really cool to do that. I'll go in on a property. I've said it before. I'm in California, Southern California. So this is not an ideal area for anything. You can get property, but it's desert, or you've got astronomical property taxes, which are going to go up and continue to go up. You've got water rationing here, where they're like, oh, hey, why don't we do this? Because some people decide they're not going to follow the same guidelines as everyone, we're going to take and put meters on wells on private property so we can charge people for the water they draw on that. We're going to take the meters and in the other properties, and if they're using more water than we think they should, we're going to put these restrictor plates in. The restrictor plate is a piece of stainless steel sheet metal with a small hole drilled in it, and they put that in line at the meter, and what it does is it reduces the water flow going into the property. Now, standard municipal water flows at between 25 and 35 gallons per minute. With said restrictor plate in place, it would reduce it to 1. So your sink could work okay, your shower would kind of work, and you would not be able to build enough water pressure to run any sort of an irrigation system. Now, mind you, in the same token, whereas you might be able to purchase things for rainwater collection, like 55-gallon drums and the ducting and everything to do that, you can even purchase it as a kit from Home Depot. It is illegal to set it up and use it. So, makes a lot of sense there. Now, fortunately, I am coastal, which is why I look at the idea of setting up a solar still. Oh, you got a Spider-Man treat? And some water? Awesome. You want to say hi to everyone? Yep. Now you ran away. You need to do something about your attire. Children. What would life be without them? I can tell you. Relaxing and boring. It'd be so much more boring. But peaceful. Like I said, wouldn't trade it. Yeah, so one of the things that I was going to touch on, and as Unspecified brought up with the Dust Bowl thing. Give me a second. Let me see if this is going to work. Fingers crossed that the scene selection here is going to work. Let's look at... Yes, it worked. Okay, weather modification. So, long time considered to be a conspiracy theory, but in fact it has been, well, fact for a long time. You know, an example of this would be cloud seeding. You know, I just trying to get stuff ready for this. I pulled up a quick news search for different articles about cloud seeding, and there's approximately 53 different countries that use cloud seeding as a source of geoengineering, trying to, you know, modify their weather to bring rain. Well, you know, it's one of those things. The globe is this, or the planet is this huge, interconnecting, interdependent system. Everything depends on it, on something else with it. You know, if you look at weather, the weather patterns, it's not like here's weather on this part of the... You know what? Hey, I'm going to use a prop. It's not like you've got weather here that's completely isolated from weather over here. It is a constant flowing, interconnected, chaotic system. So when you say cloud seed over the mountains of San Bernardino here in California, yeah, it's going to have an impact over here in the Midwest. It's kind of a logical conclusion that people want to ignore, but it's a chain reaction. You know, so when you have all of this stuff being done across the globe, you know, they talk about climate change. Aside from the fact that the climate has been changing since time immemorial, you know, we're doing stuff trying to force it to change. You know, we've got cloud seeding. You know, let's take a look at some of this. So you've got just a Wikipedia article. I know Wikipedia is not the most reliable source for information, as it does get changed, but it's a good example of, hey, look, it's mainstream now. So cloud seeding is a type of weather modification that aims to change the amount or type of precipitation that falls from clouds by dispersing substances into the air that serve as cloud condensation or ice nuclei, which alter the microphysical processes within the cloud. Effectiveness is debated. More on that in just a moment, based off of historical accounts. But they're saying that it's hard to show. Well, you know, the whole thing that people talk about with contrails or chemtrails, this is what it has to do with. And the fact that they claim it as a conspiracy theory is just trying to deflect from the fact that it happens, because, hey, let's look at this kind of realistically for a second. You have people messing with the weather and then saying, hey, it's changing, man-made, but they don't want to admit fault for it. So they want to deflect blame on things like fossil fuels. You know, at the same time that they're saying that the CO2 in the atmosphere is causing all of these problems and, you know, the global warming and stuff, there's also articles going around talking about a shortage of CO2. CO2, which happens to be one of the prerequisite items for plants and trees to be able to photosynthesize. You know, you've got the CO2 that they absorb into their leaves, which in turn gets some water mixed in with it, and the UV light from the sun, and that gets photosynthesized into energy for the plant and exhaled from the plant into oxygen that we breathe. So, you know, the CO2 in the atmosphere is kind of an important item here. So saying that we need to get rid of it, well, that's kind of a interesting topic, possibly one to expand on more in a different day. Now, let's consider for a second California. California is, in fact, a desert. we have diverted water from different parts of California to Southern California, say, for example, Los Angeles, where they use an aqueduct system to divert water from the Sierras and up near Sacramento and the Delta up there to try to make the area green and livable and productive as far as agriculture goes. But, without that, it's a desert. You know, we're also coming out of an ice age. Apparently, people forgot that. So everything is warming. And yes, Kelly, yes, the butterfly effect, exactly. And Kelly S said, I love my kid, but geez, just once I'd like to go to the bathroom without someone checking on me. Yes, that is absolutely a thing. Anyone with kids should know that quite well. There is nothing you're going to do for a while where they are not underfoot or, checking in or, you go into the bathroom, you think, you know what? I'm going to give myself some privacy. I'm going to shut the door. So you shut the door, and then all of a sudden, here's the door, and then you get these little fingers going in, or this little eyeball right here going like, hey, what are you doing? And voices and knocking. Yep, absolutely in tow. So, a sidebar there, but back to my point on this one. With the cloud seeding. Here's again how it works. They use silver iodide that gets released into the clouds in the atmosphere, and it's supposed to create ice and ice crystals. It creates clouds. It's supposed to help them condense. But again, there's going to be a trickle effect of that. But when they talk about it being a conspiracy theory, during the Vietnam War, there was a operation called Project Popeye. Well, Project Popeye or Operation Popeye, I've seen it listed both ways. And it's even noted in the Department of State's website, Office of the Historian, that it was a weather modification program in North Vietnam and Laos. What they were doing was, in effect, trying to slow the resupply efforts of the North Vietnamese or Viet Cong army by causing flooding along the Ho Chi Minh Trail system, which was going through parts of Vietnam and neighboring Laos. It was a series of roads, tunnels, trails. Now, what they did is during, I want to say it was 1966, they took military aircraft, flew them over, and released these particulates. And their goal was to cause rain and try to hamper everything. Their estimates, and you can look to this website, was that over the course of the monsoon season, they caused an additional 36 inches of rain. And their conclusion was to say that not only was it effective, it was more effective than they expected. Again, this is public record. Anyone can look at it. But again, when you look at this, you can't claim that this would have no effect on what was going on, or changing climates and weather patterns. Now, the more they try to do the cloud seeding and the weather modification, the more that they're going to cause an impact on it. And if you look at the current situation, the more they're going to use that to claim that it's a result of fossil fuels and try to push their agenda. Now, exactly unspecified, it exacerbates the situation. And it's kind of a self fulfilling prophecy, just using fossil fuels as a scapegoat. And it's just a matter of control. Now, I had another slide here that I was going to be pulling up as far as a quick topic of discussion, but I will save that for another stream having to do with drone technology. And not new drone technology either, but drone technology from 6 years ago. Now, as far as tonight's stream, I'm going to have to jump off here. I got to get with the missus and figure out what we're going to do for our dinner. But yeah, I wanted to thank you guys for stopping in and checking out the stream. I have tons of information that I want to go over in future streams. Aside from the list I have that I've discussed with what actually started the thing, every day I'm taking notes on stuff. Like this thing, can't really see it, but that was from one day's topics that I came across. This notebook is full of them. I have a Excel file full of them. This notebook is full of them. And like I said, it gets added to every day. So keep an eye out. If you see stuff that you think is going to be good information, by all means, blast links out to people. Try to help get the word out. I'm not worried about trying to gain notoriety or revenue from this, just spreading information. So anyways, have a great night, you guys.